Hi everyone, it's the Lone Keener again, back with a video at long last. It's been a while. I've had some personal issues to sort out, but that's been the case for most of this year, so I'll just dispense with that and go straight through it. Today, we're going to look at this sample that I got here, which is the Habitation Velier Mhoba 2025 unaged white rum from cane juice from South Africa. That's quite a mouthful. All of that is not on the label, but it is close enough. Now, white unaged rums as a whole tend to be seen by the mass market audience, and often their suppliers, I suppose, somewhat unfairly, I think, as somewhat of a niche market, which is understandable. It's, most of them tend to go into cocktails. The idea that one might actually sip them neat is perhaps something of an enthusiast's conceit. But I do actually believe that these things are worth a second look, even by those who are not deep into rums the way, for example, I am, and many of my friends are. Because when you want to see what happens with a white rum that isn't a Bacardi, that isn't a Lambs, or any of that milk toast white nonsense that we see far too often at 40%, then Habitation's white rum may just be what they're looking for. Now, Habitation Velier is a brand of the Velier company out of Genoa in Italy. I think most people who are into rum tend to know the company, and they concentrate almost exclusively on, well, not almost, they actually do concentrate exclusively on pot still rums, whether they're aged or unaged. And in this particular instance, there are two variations of this thing out in the open. There is the one for the American market, which is 62% with a sort of like a completely batshit crazy, insane 3,000 plus grams per hectoliter of pure alcohol of congeners. You must remember that Jamaica's DOC, or the DOK, which is 1600, which is considered to be something of a maximum, is their thing. It's not actually a global standards of any kind. So you can go as far off the reservation as you possibly want to, and in that particular case, it was 3,000. But the one I'm trying today is actually for the EU and other non-American market, and has got a much more modest 839 grams per liter of pure alcohol, and but it is a bit stronger at 66.2%. So you could argue that it kind of damages you a little bit less, if you exclude those who want to go to the very bleeding edge of, rum strength and rum power and the highest possible estimate that's available. Now, Mhoba, of course, is a reasonably well-known but rather new entrant to the rum scene. They are from South Africa. And Robert Graves, who is the owner, has spent years tinkering around making his own stills. And finally, in 2013, after some mucking around with the market and checking to see whether the products that he was making could actually possibly sell in the EU and the American market, the company was launched in 2013. It continues to be in South Africa, of course. And they have established since then a rather enviable reputation, primarily through the independent bottling scene, of producing some really quite exceptional releases. Now, obviously, most of these are quite young. Some of them are unaged and white rums. But there's one more thing to mention, and that is that he uses sugarcane that is made or that is grown right there on the Mhoba estate, which is kind of neat, right? Because that is something that you tend not to see. And as a consequence, he can make both molasses and cane juice varietals. This one is from cane juice. I don't know if there's anything else I can tell you about it. As I say, 66.2%. It had a fermentation period of 7 to 10 days. The one for the American market with a higher ester count was, I think, 2 to 4 weeks, but put that aside for the moment. And let's take a look at this thing, because with those esters and that congener count, you are going to see something quite interesting. All right. It leaves you gasping. There's no question about it. It's intense as hell. I mean, I've tried rums north of 70, 80, and 90%, and I know what those are like, but 66.2 is no slouch by any stretch of it. The nose just surges out of the glass. Their sense of anise, salt, more olives than a Middle Eastern olive grove. It's got brine. And there is a certain sort of meatiness, a sort of hogo-ness to the whole thing that reminds me a little bit of the Long Pond Teca that Habitation Velier also put out some years ago. There is actually something of a clarion background to this whole thing. So you tend to get the sense that it could be from Haiti, coming to South Africa or something like that. It's not, of course it's not. But you get wax, rubber, fruits, pineapples, rotten oranges, laban, some faint whiffs of sour cream. And, that doesn't really sound like something really interesting, but I argue that it really is quite original, and it's not unpleasant by any means, but it does take some getting used to. And I will concede that there are going to be people who are going to push this aside and just say, you know what, oh God, this I just can't handle this thing. Now, to taste it, this is feral. It goes from, zero to drunk in just a couple of shots. So the strength makes it sharp, yes, but I argue that it's a sort of like a crisp firmness rather than some sort of scratch of a libidinous tomcat's claws in your throat. You can taste glue, rubber, again, wax, tart fruit, yogurt. And when it comes to those fruits, there's a little bit of everything here. Grapes, oranges, tangerines, peaches, some green unripe apples, a plum or two, red grapefruit. It's a little bit of sour and it's a little bit of sweet and it's a little bit of salt and there's some anise and there's that iodine seaweed scent of sushi or soya sauce, if you really want to put it that way. But I suggest that this is the sort of rum that you really want to take your time with. I mean, of course, you can mix it, and most people actually will. They'll probably put it in a daiquiri or, some other form of rum, some other form of cocktail that's going to make it shine a little bit better. But I think you should basically try it for the first time alone and just see what you think about it. And there are some agricole or herbal notes to it, mossy wooden forest floors after a rain. And the hogo continues to be there, but very much in the background, which is really kind of nice. Again, it reminds me a lot of the Tekka, but not quite as much hogo on this one. Not that rotten, meaty garbage smell that kind of like made that rum so polarizing. And again, it reminds me a lot of the Claret, the Sajus in particular, right? Because that had that same olivey, salty, briny thing to it. But it really is really quite interesting. And if everybody won't say it's nice, well, I do. Right. So as far as I'm concerned, it is quite a rum. There's a lot going on here, as these tasting notes would suggest. At this, there's some originality, there's some complexity that might turn off people who like softer, more molasses-based, let's say, Latin-style rums. That's perfectly understandable. I make no judgment on that. I just point it out as an observation. But one does drink, I have to admit, for a good time, not necessarily to tease out tasting notes and so on. So you don't want to peer into the abyss of what a still, a high congener count, or a certifiable bottler can come up with just because they felt like, frigging around in that particular thing. Me, I liked it quite a lot. And I'm going to score this at 86. Part of that is going to be for the originality, but I just genuinely like the taste, right? So that's a personal opinion of mine, of course, and you are welcome to say that it should get more or it should get less. I think 86 is just about right. I can't even imagine what that 3,000 congener count version for the United States market is like, but I really got to try that freaking thing. That's pretty much the review as it is. But as always, I do like to close off with a couple of observations, right? It is to Velier's credit, I think, and that of Mhoba themselves, of course, that they're not afraid to go to wherever the rum leads, whatever comes off the still. They do stretch the boundaries of the rum world quite a bit, and that's one of the reasons why they're so well known now. For Luca Gargano, the boss of Velier, of course, part of this has always been, as I've remarked before, somewhat educational. The whole Habitation Velier line is, as far as I'm concerned, somewhat of an educational project because it teaches people a little bit about what pot still rums can be. But there's just this sense of enthusiasm about what they've done here, right? It's like they want to be the first. They want to showcase some weird shit. They're absolutely mental about introducing us to stuff that we've barely even heard of before, or taking existing rum profiles or existing ways of making rum and twisting it into a new Grand Guignol-inspired pretzel. I mean, these are people who run heedlessly and headfirst into a wall, and like those old cartoons, and you leave a nice little Luca-shaped imprint in it as he goes through the damn thing. So I think the Mhoba 2025, they kind of achieved all of what they wanted to. It's really too insane to crack 90 points for all of its power and all of its tasting note, but it does take its place reasonably proudly with the Sajus and the Tekka and those kinds of rums that kind of go off the edge a little bit. And this is one of their more startling and original rums that they've made in quite a while. It's been a pleasure to try it, I can say. And say what you will about whites and overproofs and the lack of aging or a cranked up flavor profile or that insane ester count and so on. This thing has character, and I do like character, and it's well worth sampling, even if only to say you've tried it the one time. I'm going to leave it there for a while, and hopefully I can get the next bunch of reviews out a little bit faster. I've got quite a few in the queue, so I will talk to you all later. Have a really nice Christmas season, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.